So James, you was involved in the planning of London 2012 at bid stage. Talk us through some of your memories and some of the work you did, particularly about the Olympic Park in those days.
During the London 2012 bid, one of the first things we had to think about was why was London bidding? And of course, the big opportunity here was to regenerate part of East London. And we sat down and looked at some plans, and there was this almost like a tear down the middle of East London where there had been no development on the map. And we saw this as the strategic opportunity to regenerate this part, an area which is probably one of the most deprived areas of the whole of London and probably the UK. And so by doing the regeneration that you can see here now, it's absolutely transformed an area which used to be somewhere where people wanted to get away from. Now people come here as a tourist destination. Kids play in the fountains. There's people up in the orbit looking out across the Olympic Park. It's fantastic events being staged in all the venues. So I think the vision that was set out in those very early stages of the bid have absolutely been achieved here now.
Yeah. And what about when you was actually planning the master plan, which cited venues and carving up what went where? What was that like when you had so many options available? How was you able to sort of refine it to a plan that actually is pretty faithful to what ended up being delivered?
Well, that's right, and I think what the real challenge there was ultimately we had to build something that was going to be part of London for the next 150, 200, 300 years, not something that just worked for 2 weeks of the summer events that were staged here in 2012. So when we were thinking about the plan, we really started from the legacy master plan, right from the very early stages of thinking, okay, where is the new neighbourhoods, how are the connections going to work, where are the roads going to go, where are the transport links going to be, where are the stations going to connect in, and how will all those waterways and road networks work. So we worked very hard to plan that base infrastructure first, then layer on top of that the housing. So where are all the new residential accommodation going to be? 8,000 new homes were planned for the Olympic Park. So slowly but surely we layered that out, and then we worked back from that to say, okay, and this is how the Olympics can overlay into that. So we looked at where the venues would come, how the people would move in and out of those venues, how the landscape would work and interact with those venues. So that's very much how we devised the master plan, from the very latest stages of the legacy back to the stage at which we would host the games.
It's incredible really that we did stay so true to that philosophy that was established in the bid. And I think when John and I joined LOCOG in 2006?
2006.
Actually what we had was something that was already really workable and was subject to some refinement and improvement, but actually we had the workings of a plan that we were able to then move forward with collectively and sort of move into delivery mode.
I think it was quite unique in many respects because we were working from a foundation of a construction drawing over master plan into starting to think about operations and how the venues needed to work, how the spaces needed to work, what temporary commodities we needed to bring in to actually run and operate the event. And I think one of those kind of major phases as we worked through the many years leading up to the Games was that transition from construction completion into operations and how we managed that, resourced it, and actually gave ourselves a really good run at being able to test ourselves and test our teams in order to deliver on the Olympic opening ceremony and the events thereafter.
Yeah, and I think the work that we did right throughout the 6 or 7 year journey leading up to the Games to forge relationships and partnerships with the ODA, we were obviously on the LOCOG side, and with all the other stakeholders really stood us in good stead that when we came to operations, everyone understood who was responsible for what, who was going to do what, and the operational teams had a plan that was actually quite mature and really well thought through that they could then move forward to implement.
I mean, that overall kind of stakeholder management that we had to undertake as part of the project teams delivering on an Olympics and Paralympics is a huge undertaking, and it takes some very careful and kind of precise management to kind of work your way through that.
Yeah. There's quite a major temporary event build here. So people say it was the biggest ever temporary event build for an Olympic Games. You're at the heart of that, Paul. What did that take to get ready and prepare for all the temporary structures and the overlay?
Yeah, well, there's a misnomer, isn't there, that it's temporary, so it all happens right at the end, whereas actually the success of the temporary programme here was down to all the planning that had taken place over the years preceding the Games. And so these things didn't happen by accident. We had some really big venues. In fact, just over my shoulder, was the Riverbank Arena, which was a very substantial temporary build for the hockey, for the games, and was also a Paralympic venue. Planning that so it was well coordinated into the fabric of the park, the infrastructure that was built in the park, that there was enough space for it to happen, and it properly coordinated with the activities within the wider park. That took an awful lot of planning. I mean, for me, one of the things that really sticks with me is that interface between LOCOG, the organising committee, and the ODA as the delivery authority, and the dynamic, which, as you'll remember, was really tough at times, but was really well spent and very valuable, because it meant that we understood how we were responsible for what we were responsible for, how we interfaced, and then when it came to delivery of all the temporary infrastructure, it actually all been planned through and coordinated really well with the permanent works and infrastructure that the ODA had delivered. So, yeah, for me, the temporary programme happened over a period of 5 years, not just in that final 6 months.